The crash echoed through the small Phoenix apartment like thunder, followed by the delicate tinkling of broken glass. Elena Rivera's hand flew to her mouth as she watched her 17-year-old son Marcus storm away from the wreckage of her precious altar. The statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe lay in pieces across the hardwood floor, surrounded by scattered prayer candles and wilted roses. "Marcus, no," she whispered, but he was already slamming his bedroom door with enough force to rattle the family photos on the hallway wall. The silence that followed felt heavier than the desert heat pressing against the windows. Elena dropped to her knees among the debris, her fingers trembling as she gathered the fragments of the ceramic statue she had carried from Mexico 23 years ago. This altar had been her sanctuary since Roberto's death, the one place where she could still feel close to her husband and find strength to raise their son alone. But Marcus saw only reminders of a God who had abandoned them. The argument had started over something simple, college applications scattered across the kitchen table. But like every conversation lately, it had spiraled into the deeper wound neither of them knew how to heal. 2 years of grief had turned her gentle boy into a stranger who looked at her faith with contempt. As Elena cradled the broken face of the Virgin Mary, she had no idea that across the thin apartment wall, Marcus lay staring at his ceiling, already hearing something that would change everything. A voice, soft as a whisper, calling his name. The voice came again at 3 in the morning, pulling Marcus from restless sleep. Marcus, clear as daylight, though his room remained empty in the amber glow of streetlights filtering through his blinds. He sat up, heart hammering against his ribs. The apartment was silent except for the distant hum of the air conditioner and his mother's muffled sobs from across the hall. She was still awake, probably praying over the pieces of her broken altar. 2 years ago, Roberto Rivera had been coaching Marcus's baseball team when a massive heart attack struck. One moment he was laughing at Marcus's swing, the next he was gone. 43 years old, no warning signs, no goodbye. The doctors called it a widow-maker, as if giving it a name could somehow make sense of the senseless. Elena had turned to prayer with desperate intensity, transforming their living room corner into a shrine. Candles burned constantly, novenas filled her evenings, and she spoke to the Virgin Mary like an old friend who might intercede with a God who had seemingly forgotten them. But Marcus had chosen anger instead. Every statue, every prayer, every whispered plea felt like a betrayal of his father's memory. If God existed, why hadn't he saved the best man Marcus had ever known? If stories like this move you and you believe in moments where faith meets the unexplainable, make sure you subscribe because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about miracles. The voice whispered his name once more, and this time Marcus felt something shift in the darkness around him. Marcus tried to convince himself it was stress. Finals week, the fight with his mother, the guilt gnawing at him since destroying her altar. The mind could play tricks when pushed too far, create sounds that weren't really there. But the voice came every night now, always at the same time, always with the same gentle insistence. Marcus! Sometimes it seemed to echo from the walls themselves. Other times it felt like a whisper directly into his ear. During the day, he threw himself into normal teenage routines. Basketball with friends, shifts at the grocery store, anything to avoid going home where his mother moved like a ghost through rooms that still smelled faintly of the prayer candles he had scattered. Elena had quietly swept up the broken statue, but she hadn't replaced it. The empty corner where her altar once stood felt like an accusation every time Marcus walked past. His friends noticed his irritability, the dark circles under his eyes, the way he jumped at unexpected sounds. "You look like death, man," his teammate Jake said after practice. "Everything okay at home?" Marcus wanted to tell someone about the voice, about the way shadows seemed to shift in his peripheral vision, about the dreams where his father stood just out of reach, lips moving but no sound emerging. Instead, he shrugged and grabbed his gym bag. That night, as he lay in bed dreading sleep, the voice came with new urgency. "Marcus, listen." And for the first time, he thought he heard something else underneath it, something that sounded impossibly like his father's laugh. The laughter came clearer the next night, wrapped around his name like an embrace Marcus remembered from childhood. His father's distinctive chuckle, the one that used to fill their apartment during Sunday morning pancake sessions and late-night homework help. Marcus sat up in bed, tears streaming down his face for the first time since the funeral. "Dad?" he whispered into the darkness, feeling foolish but desperate. The response wasn't words, but a warmth that seemed to fill the room, chasing away the desert night's artificial chill. For a moment, Marcus felt 8 years old again, safe in his father's presence after a nightmare. But morning always brought doubt. In daylight, the experiences felt like elaborate self-deception, grief manifesting in auditory hallucinations. He researched sleep disorders online, convinced himself he was having some kind of breakdown. Elena noticed his deteriorating condition. Dark circles had become permanent fixtures under his eyes, and he'd lost weight from skipping meals. She approached him tentatively as he sat at the kitchen table, staring at untouched cereal. "Mijo, are you sleeping?" Her voice carried the same exhaustion that lined her face. Marcus looked at his mother, really looked at her for the first time in months. She seemed smaller somehow, aged beyond her 45 years. The destruction of her altar had broken something fundamental in her, and he was the one who'd wielded the hammer. "I keep hearing things," he admitted quietly, surprising himself. "At night, like someone calling my name." Elena's hand found his across the table, her touch gentle as morning light. The voice no longer waited for night. It came during Marcus's history test, clear as the teacher's lecture, causing him to drop his pencil and stare at the empty seat beside him. "Marcus, you need to listen." His classmates noticed his odd behavior. Sarah Chun, who sat behind him in calculus, asked if he was okay after he spun around twice during their quiz, convinced someone had tapped his shoulder. "I'm fine," he lied, but his hands shook as he tried to focus on derivatives and integrals. The numbers blurred together, meaningless against the growing certainty that something beyond his understanding was trying to reach him. At home, Elena had begun what she called a spiritual siege. Father Miguel Santos from St. Augustine's visited twice weekly, leading rosaries in their living room while Marcus hid in his bedroom. The priest's gentle voice carried through thin walls, praying for healing and understanding. "The boy is in pain," Marcus heard Father Miguel tell his mother. "Sometimes souls need to break completely before they can heal." But Marcus wasn't breaking, he was awakening. The voice had begun speaking in full sentences now, always in that familiar cadence that made his chest ache with longing. "Your mother's heart is shattered, son. She prays for you every hour." The words carried weight that pressed against Marcus's ribcage, making it hard to breathe. In the bathroom mirror that morning, he barely recognized the hollow-eyed stranger staring back at him. His rebellion against God had become a rebellion against everything good in his life. Sleep became impossible. The voice spoke constantly now, weaving through Marcus's thoughts like smoke through cracks in a wall. At work, he dropped a case of canned tomatoes when his father's voice whispered, "Remember when we built that shelf together?" His manager, Mrs. Patterson, pulled him aside after his third accident that week. "Son, I don't know what's going on at home, but you can't keep working like this. Take a few days off." Marcus nodded numbly, knowing he couldn't explain that his dead father was having conversations with him about childhood memories and his mother's broken heart. The voice had grown more insistent, no longer just calling his name, but offering guidance he wasn't ready to hear. "She lights candles for you every morning," the voice said as Marcus walked home through the desert heat. "Praise to Our Lady for your healing. Do you remember what I taught you about forgiveness?" The memories came flooding back despite Marcus's resistance. His father's patient voice explaining that anger was like holding hot coals, that forgiveness wasn't weakness but strength. Roberto had lived those words, never raising his voice even when Marcus pushed boundaries. At home, Elena sat at their small kitchen table with Father Miguel, both their faces creased with worry. Marcus paused outside the door, listening to their whispered conversation about intervention and therapy and the healing power of prayer. "He's fighting something bigger than grief," Father Miguel said softly. Sometimes God calls us through our deepest pain. That night, the voice changed everything. Instead of gentle memories or soft guidance, it carried a weight that pressed against Marcus's soul like a physical force. "You think your anger protects you," his father's voice said with crystal clarity. "But it's killing your mother. It's killing you." Marcus bolted upright, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Stop," he whispered fiercely. "Just stop." But the voice continued, relentless now. "I didn't leave you by choice, son. Death took me, but you're choosing to stay dead inside. Your mother needs the boy I raised, not this stranger wearing his face." The words hit like physical blows. Marcus stumbled to his feet, pacing the small room as tears burned his eyes. "You left us," he said aloud, not caring if Elena heard through the thin walls. "You promised you'd always be here." "I am here," came the reply, filled with infinite patience. "I've been here every night, watching you destroy the faith that sustained our family for generations. Your grandmother's prayers, your mother's devotion, the altar she built to keep our love alive. You scattered it all like dust." The memory of that afternoon rushed back with nauseating clarity. His mother's gasp, the crash of breaking ceramic, the way her shoulders had shaken with silent sobs. He'd wanted to hurt God, but he'd wounded the person who loved him most. "I was angry," Marcus choked out. "And now," the voice asked gently, "what are you now?" "Empty, broken, lost in darkness he'd created himself." Marcus didn't sleep for 3 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his mother's face the moment the altar crashed to the floor. The voice had gone silent after their confrontation, leaving him alone with the crushing weight of his own choices. He wandered through their apartment like a ghost, avoiding Elena's worried glances and Father Miguel's gentle attempts at conversation. The priest visited daily now, clearly sensing some spiritual crisis building to a crescendo. On the 4th night, exhaustion finally claimed him. But instead of his father's voice, Marcus found himself in a dream that felt more real than waking. He stood in their old house, the one they'd lost after Roberto's death, watching his 80-year-old self help his father hang a picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe in the hallway. "Why do we pray to her, Dad?" Dream Marcus asked. "Because she understands a mother's love," Roberto replied, his carpenter's hands gentle as he adjusted the frame. "She knows what it means to watch your child suffer and still believe in God's plan." Adult Marcus watched his father's face, memorizing features that had grown fuzzy in his memory. The deep laugh lines, the patient brown eyes, the way he looked at everything with such fundamental kindness. "Your mother is like her," Roberto continued. "She loves you enough to keep believing when you've stopped believing in yourself." The dream dissolved, but the voice returned with new urgency. "Tomorrow, son. Tomorrow you choose who you're going to be." Marcus opened his eyes, knowing with absolute certainty that everything was about to change. Marcus found his mother kneeling in the empty corner where her altar once stood, her rosary beads clicking softly in the pre-dawn darkness. She didn't look up when he approached, though he knew she sensed his presence. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking like it hadn't since he was 13. "I need to tell you something." Elena's hands stilled on the rosary, but she remained facing the bare wall where Our Lady's image had once smiled down on their family, waiting with the infinite patience she'd shown him his entire life. "I've been hearing Dad's voice," Marcus said, the words tumbling out like a confession. "Every night since I broke your altar, he's been telling me things, showing me things. About you, about me, about how wrong I've been." Now Elena turned, her face illuminated by the hallway light spilling into the room. Tears tracked down her cheeks, but her expression held no surprise, only profound relief. "I know, Mijo," she said softly. "I've been praying for exactly this. For him to reach you somehow, to help you find your way back." Marcus collapsed beside her on the hardwood floor, finally releasing the grief he'd held prisoner for 2 years. "I'm sorry," he sobbed against her shoulder. "I'm so sorry for everything. For breaking your altar, for hurting you, for being angry at God when I should have been grateful for the time we had." Elena's arms wrapped around him as he wept, her own tears falling freely now. "We all grieve differently, son, but we don't have to grieve alone." Together, they approached the corner where Elena had kept the broken pieces of the statue in a small wooden box. Marcus lifted the lid with trembling hands, revealing fragments of ceramic that had once been Our Lady's serene face. "I thought maybe we could try to fix her," Elena said quietly. "Piece by piece, like we're doing with ourselves." As Marcus picked up the largest fragment, something extraordinary happened. The piece felt warm in his palm, not from his touch, but as if heated from within. The sensation spread up his arm and into his chest, filling him with a peace he hadn't known since his father's death. "Do you feel that?" he whispered. Elena nodded, her eyes wide with wonder as she touched another piece. The warmth seemed to flow between them, connecting mother and son in a moment that transcended the physical world. Then came the voice, but not just his father's this time. A feminine presence, gentle and motherly, speaking directly to Marcus's heart. "My son, your tears water the ground where new faith will grow. Your mother's prayers have prepared the soil." The broken pieces in their hands began to glow with soft light, not blinding, but warm like candle flame. Marcus felt his father's presence stronger than ever, but now joined by something ancient and nurturing, a love that had watched over families for centuries. "She hears us," Elena breathed, her face luminous with joy. "Our Lady hears us." For the first time in 2 years, Marcus felt truly home. The next morning, Marcus surprised Elena by asking to attend Mass with her for the first time in 2 years. As they walked into St. Augustine's, Father Miguel's face lit up with quiet joy, though he asked no questions about the sudden change. During the service, Marcus felt his father's presence beside him, no longer a mysterious voice in the darkness, but a comforting companion. When the congregation rose for the Our Father, Marcus's voice joined theirs, rusty from disuse, but genuine in its reverence. After Mass, he approached the youth group that met in the parish hall. Maria Santos, Father Miguel's niece, looked up in surprise as Marcus lingered near their circle. "Would it be okay if I joined you guys?" he asked, the words feeling foreign but right. Within weeks, Marcus found himself sharing his story with teenagers who carried their own wounds. Jake Martinez, whose parents were divorcing. Sarah Kim, struggling with depression. Tommy Walsh, angry about his grandfather's recent death. "I thought God had abandoned me," Marcus told them during one evening session. "But I was the one who walked away. He was there the whole time, speaking through my dad's voice, working through my mom's prayers." The group listened with the intensity of young people hungry for authentic hope. Marcus's transformation wasn't just personal anymore. It was becoming a testimony that rippled through their community. Elena watched from the kitchen doorway as her son prayed with his new friends, his face peaceful in a way she hadn't seen since Roberto's death. The altar corner now held a new statue of Our Lady, surrounded by candles that burned steady and bright. 1 year later, Marcus stood before the same altar corner where his journey had begun, but everything was transformed. The new statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe seemed to smile with the same peace that now lived in his heart. Elena lit the evening candles as she had for decades, but her movements carried joy instead of desperate hope. "Ready for tonight's meeting?" she asked, watching Marcus gather materials for the grief support group he now led at St. Augustine's. The group had grown from 5 teenagers to 20, with parents joining sessions where Marcus shared how supernatural grace had broken through his darkest moment. His testimony had become legendary in their parish, drawing families from across Phoenix who struggled with loss and anger. Tommy Walsh, whose grandfather's death had sent him into his own spiritual crisis, now served as Marcus's assistant. "My dad wants to thank you again," Tommy said, organizing chairs in the parish hall. "He said he got his son back because you shared your story." Father Miguel often spoke of the Rivera family as proof that God writes straight with crooked lines, that even our deepest rebellion can become the foundation for ministry. Marcus's experience with his father's voice had become a bridge between grief and healing for dozens of families. As the evening session began, Marcus felt that familiar presence, not mysterious now, but companionable, his father's love woven through every word of comfort he offered. Have you ever witnessed something that science couldn't explain? Share your story in the comments below and let us know if you've experienced moments where the impossible became possible.